if you would have asked me 10 or 15 years ago if I understand life, I would have said, of course I understand life. Look how my life is. I have the material wealth, I have luxury. I was very successful and 100% in the material world. You know, Ferrari, Porsche, Rolex. I was the youngest managing director of a very big company. 15 years later, I am at the point that I would say I'm slightly starting to really getting to know what is life. 1 year, I think, after my first burnout, my mother booked a yoga course in Salzburg, and my mother gets ill, and she said, Chris, you are so interested in the whole spiritual field. Have you ever done a yoga class? And then I attended the course. I looked around. I saw the Babaji picture, and Babaji I already know, or I already knew at this moment. And then on the other side of the rows was Guruji, And I just saw him, and I just have to smile, Since this time, I did nearly every day Atma Kriya Yoga. Suddenly, I have to put away all other things, Because I was very strong in the mental field and visualization and Yogananda and Mother Amma and Mother Mera. But since I met Guruji, I put everything away. This is the story of my son Milo. That was the most amazing situation in our life, also from my girlfriend. 2017 was his birth in January, and you know, after 1 or 2 days, the doctors are beginning to check the child if everything is in the right order. And after 3 days, doctor said he has a hole in his left heart chamber. I went to the hospital, and he had a hole in the left chamber, and the blood was pumping, Blood was pumping. So that means that the other chamber, the other ventricle, has to do more work. Normally 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%, but because of the hole, it loses pressure, and therefore the other chamber has to pump more. And you know, if the heart ratio is going up and up and up, like the heart frequency is very dangerous. The younger the child, the higher is the risk of complication, because you know, if a little baby, everything is small. We have to go once in a month to the hospital, and he was checked. The heart ratio, how long is or how big is the hole, with ultrasound, once a month. And you are very alert to everything. The first thought was, is something with his heart, They said, normally, it's really unbelievable, because our son develops and develops and develops like all other children, from the brain, from the coordination, from the body and mind aspect. Everything was good. And the doctors always say normally it's not possible, that he can run and he can cry and he can jump. Then the doctor said, now it's very very dangerous that blood is coming in the lung, and if blood is coming in the lung, it's game over. Okay, and I said, Guruji, on the mental way, Guruji, what should I do? Should we make operation or not? He said, no, everything is fine inside, He said, no, everything is fine. And after 2 years, I wrote Tushti and asked Tushti, is it possible to get the contact directly to Guruji. And she said, not directly, but if you put your question on a sheet, I will go with this sheet to a Swami, and the Swami will forward it to Guruji. Our prayer was, Guruji, what should we do with our son? Should we make operation or not? And can you help him? And Guruji said, yes, no operation is needed now, but it can be perhaps if he's 6 or 7, because then his body is so strong that he can survive such a big operation. I think 6 months later, I think Milo was at the age of 3. We were here we've been here in Springen, Nilaya, and I was meditating, and suddenly I get an impulse to go to the dining hall. I jumped up, ran in the dining hall, and Swami Kurunanda stands before me, and he said, everything okay? And I said, Swami Kurunanda, I need Guruji now. And he said, you're very lucky, because now he is in the dining hall. Let's make a photo from you. Then he took a photo from me and give it to Guruji, and then he comes out, so Swami Kurunanda, and said, Guruji will come in 5 minutes. I jumped out, looked for my girlfriend and our son, and said, Guruji is coming. And we have been in the hall, and Guruji was coming, and he was directly going to Milo, to our son. Normally our son is a little bit distanced. You cannot hug our son, because you would make this or whatever. And Guruji came, and he took him here and laid his hands on his heart. He said to us, everything will be fine, and he's with him. And he said, now we should not make an operation, but perhaps in 3 years, if he's going to school. The hole in his heart was 12 millimeters. It's big. It's really big in relation to a small heart. 12 millimeters. The relation was 80% of the whole heart power did the right chamber, and just 20% the left chamber. 80 to 20. And the doctor said, it's really heavy. Should we not make an operation? Guruji, should we make an operation? No. Because he was running with the other children, and he was fit and he was strong, and therefore we said no. We have been on holiday in Greek, and Milo and I, we were swimming, and I looked to him, and suddenly he said, Dad, I have to go out now. I can't swim anymore. And then I knew, okay, now we have to make the operation. And I asked Guruji, should we now make the operation? And he said yes. And I think I asked Tushti, she should contact him directly. And he said, yes, make the operation, I will do it. Nothing will happen. Okay. In this endless trust, because in such a case you give the life the Guru. You give not your life, not my life. You give the life of your children, of your child. You give it to the Guru. Normally you are waiting very long, for the appointment that you get this appointment. I think 3 weeks later we had the appointment. You have to make 25 different contracts and signatures, and then they said, by the way, the risk is very high that he needs a heart pacemaker, which steers the rhythm, electronical device in the heart. Okay, we did not know it, but Sri Krishna upon us to let's give it to the feet of Guruji. 2 hours for the operation, before the operation. And then they said, and the possibility is very high that he needs blood. And we said, blood? Everything is in your hands, Guruji. And we signed. You know, your small baby with 6 years, is lying on a bar, and they drive him, he was driven by the doctors to the operation room. And it was a door like this, like in a supermarket, yeah. The heaviest moment in my life, because you have to let go your son, and you don't know, will he survive the operation or will he not survive? Yeah. And the door opens, and I looked, and there was Guruji standing. And he said to me, everything is okay, I will do it. You know, Guruji with the most beautiful smile, with the most beautiful aura, with God stands in front of you. Yeah. If you want to know how God looks like, you have to look at Guruji. Then you know who is God. Yeah. And this was the case. He stand and said, "Don't worry, everything will be okay." And then he took the doctors like with a Batman. You know what I mean? And then the door was closing. We have to wait 7 hours. 7 hours. And you know, because the doctor said after the operation they will give us a call. I think you can imagine how you look on your mobile phone 6 hours. And 6.5 hours later, the mobile was ringing. Eva Maria, my girlfriend, said, "You take the mobile," and I said, "Yes." And then she said, "The operation was great. It was unbelievable. It was like in a book, yeah, where you learn something. It was better than in a book, and he did not lose one drop of blood." And he's very healthy, yeah, and we can go to him in 1 hour. We cried and cried and cried and cried, yeah, and then we saw him in the intense care station. Yeah, it's not a nice picture if you see your son 100,000 cables and the sound of the devices. And then I said to the doctor, "What is with the membrane? Yeah, does he need a heart, this device, this heart pressure maker?" And then he said, "We have to observe it the next 3 hours. Yeah, when the heart ratio is like this, like the last 20 minutes, it's perfect." Yeah, you can imagine how you look on the screen. Yeah, the next 3 hours. And after 3 hours, they said 100% sure, no heart pressure maker is needed. After 1 day, he was out of the 1.5 day. He was out of the intense care station. The healing of the scarf and the healing of all organical processes were very stable, and therefore he could go out from the intense care station after 2 days, and additional 2 days we were in the normal station, and then we could go home. And they said it's a miracle. It's a miracle. I think 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, he was playing football again. And you know how children are playing football. That's not ballet, yeah? That's tough. Yeah. And after 4 weeks, he played football already. Everything was so perfect that's normally not possible. Now everything is great. Of course, it's His grace, yeah. But slightly He removes my Maya, yeah, so that I can slightly know who He really is. And I don't try to understand the Guru anymore. because it's not possible. Guruji says 40 centimeters from the mind to the heart. Very short way, but the longest way on our trip.